Good morning. I'm Scott Peyton, State Director for Right on Crime here in Louisiana. Welcome to Right on Crime's second of 5 webinars that will focus on second chance hiring. I would like to welcome today's guests, Secretary Jimmy LeBlanc with the Louisiana Department of Corrections, and Josh Smith, who's a Right on Crime signatory, a businessman, advocate, and formerly incarcerated. Special thanks to everyone who has joined us today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Please enter your questions at any time during the presentation in the question and answer bar. You should find it at the bottom of your screen. At the end, we'll allow about 15 minutes for questions. I'll go through the questions and ask them to the appropriate panelist. We will also be providing additional information in the chat bar throughout the webinar. We'll have Josh's website and we'll have some links for the Department of Corrections as well. Just a little history about our employer forums. For the past 2 years, Right on Crime has sponsored in-person forums throughout the state of Louisiana. And what we did is we gathered together reentry groups, state agencies, and everyone that was local to those particular areas in an attempt to encourage and inform employers about the benefits of hiring the formerly incarcerated. I'm sure everyone's aware since March, the way we do business has dramatically changed. And due to COVID, we've decided to move these forums to a virtual format. We've shortened them from 4 hours, fortunately, to 1 hour, and they will be recorded, and you'll be able to find the link to this recording on the Right on Crime website. Also located in the comment bar will be a link to the Right on Crime Employer Handbook, which we created. I have to find which way my video is going. And our forums have been based off the information that's in the handbook. A digital version is in the comment section. Lastly, the webinars are approved for 1 hour of continuing education from the Society of Human Resource Managers, or SHRM. And if you need that activity ID number, that will be in the comment section as well. I am very excited about today's topic, which will focus on how prison programming can benefit reentry both pre and post-release. Again, I would like to thank both Secretary LeBlanc and Josh Smith for taking time from their busy schedules to discuss reentry, what it looks like inside of Louisiana prisons, and how this is carried over to post-release through community supervision and through community partners. Secretary LeBlanc, it would take the rest of our time if I read your entire bio, but I will go ahead and go through the short version. Secretary LeBlanc has worked as a civil servant to the state of Louisiana through the Department of Public Safety and Corrections for more than 40 years. And prior to committing service in this great state, Secretary LeBlanc enlisted in the United States Army, served during the Vietnam War, and earned an honorable discharge in 1971. After that, he returned to school, received a BA in Business Administration from Southeastern Louisiana University in December of '72. In January 2008, Governor Bobby Jindal appointed Secretary LeBlanc to the cabinet position with responsibility for statewide correctional operations. In 2016, he was reappointed by Governor John Bell Edwards to continue to lead the charge in corrections for a third term. Secretary LeBlanc has a focus on reentry. He's very passionate about reentry, and he believes that establishing valuable real-world vocational and educational and life training skills for offenders in all institutions is one of the keys to ensuring the core mission of public safety. Secretary LeBlanc, again, thank you for your service both to our country and to our state. As I mentioned earlier, the purpose of our forums and this webinar in particular is to help employers realize what steps are being taken to make Louisiana reentry ready. And this occurs from the moment that they enter into DOC custody. If you don't mind, walk us through the programming, what it looks like inside of Louisiana's prisons, and why this is so important to reentry and ultimately, as your bio says, to public safety, which is the core mission of the Department of Public Safety and Corrections.
Well, thank you, Scott, for that introduction, and thank you and Right on Crime for continuing to promote and encourage our state to recognize the importance of giving our justice-involved citizens a second chance, and especially when returning to our communities. And we all know this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. This is something that we have to stick with, and something you guys have stuck with. And I know you spent some time in our legislature, and you've actually spent time in our department and understand very intricately of our challenges when it comes to criminal justice reform. I always like to talk a little bit about why this is important and giving people a second chance. Of course, you know, people don't, I think this sometimes, especially with our employers, it enhances public safety. And you know, individuals diverted to a healthy work environment, they're not likely and obviously won't return to the corner to make ends meet. And that's very simple. It's not complicated. Support family unification. I think Josh will talk a little bit about that. He's experienced that personally, but we all know that, you know, helping those that are returning to our communities is going to not only enhance public safety, but help their family, their spouse, their children, their loved ones, you know, people that they're involved with. And again, that enhances our neighborhoods and our communities. Reduce crime, that's directly related to public safety. You know, sending people out of prison without a stable plan, involving employment is a recipe for disaster. You know, I've said it many a times in Louisiana, it was a poster child, I believe, for why this country needed to change the way it does business. We were living the experience before justice reinvestment, and we've learned better. We see this through experience that things are working. In 2012, our prison population was at 41,000. Our incarceration rate was not only the highest in the world, we still probably rank in that category, but it was twice the national average. Yet we were in the top 10 in every crime stat, top 10 in every crime stat. Our prison population was churning. You know, we were not making Louisiana any safer by what we were doing by locking up and throwing away the key. What's a better plan for Louisiana? Corrections cannot be successful in our mission if we're only focusing on housing and feeding our population while they're with us. We must provide opportunities for rehab. That involves all sorts of things, drug treatment, transformation. Again, I think Josh can talk to that. You know, I think our faith-based community plays a role in this. And when you transform somebody to think differently, education, you know, literacy, basic ed, GED, you know, most of the people that come into our system are in the 7th to 9th grade reading level. We are doing that. We're working on getting them ready for trades and the things that they have to do in order to make it on the outside. And skill sets with vocational program, industry-based certification, you know, those sorts of things have to be a part of what we're doing. And then soft skills, you know, we've learned very early on in this with our employers, if they don't know how to be on a job or work with people, be around people, how to treat people. And again, this ties a little bit back to the transformation, how to be amongst people, then they don't want them on their job site. And that's important, critical in what we do in our reentry efforts. And we have come a long way in changing the culture in our state, from locking people up and throwing away the key, and providing opportunities for change, not just in our prisons, but in our community corrections, in probation and parole, and in our community organizations. And I'll mention that here a little bit later in my comments, but our community organizations are really becoming an integral part of the transformation back into our communities. Our prison population decline, our crime rate is down. I know it's hard to realize that when everything you read about, hear about, you would think that crime's out of control. But when you look at the crime stats, and we get those through the feds, our crime stats are actually down in Louisiana. So that again is a good indication and an indicator that our new approach and focus can be a success. The time for today's discussion is not allowing me to go back and talk about all the things that we have done. I would like to take this time today to talk a little bit about where we are. And I want to mention our prison population. We're down almost 13,000 prisoners in our population of a peak of 42,000. That's almost a 32% reduction in our prison population. We still rank high in incarceration rate, but I assure you that 32% reduction is the highest in the country in reducing our prison population. And I would mention that 23% of that has been since our 2017 criminal justice reform efforts. And cost savings, we have legislation now that allows us to reinvest. And that, believe me, we couldn't be doing the things we were doing if we couldn't reinvest the savings. 70% of the savings are tied back to reinvesting in our reentry efforts. And I need to mention this, both sides of the aisles, our legislators, they've been completely supportive of this initiative. for our crime victims. We reinvested $4 million back into our crime victims. What has that done? That's almost caught up 3 years of reparation fund money for our victims out there to get paid back what they would do. In addition to, just in the East Baton Rouge Parish area in our region, a family justice center. We're investing right at $1.5 million over 2 years into a family justice center here in the Baton Rouge metropolitan area. Office of Juvenile Justice has gotten $4.6 million from our reinvestment on the juvenile end for programs in our communities to cut off that pipeline that we know exists from our juvenile services into adult corrections. We have got to stop that pipeline. Then our DOC reinvestment is roughly about $10 million. Where are we going with that? We're going to the local level because we house 50% of our prison population at the local level. They need some structure, and we have reentry centers now. We have 10 reentry centers basically focused in our metropolitan areas that we are actually upgrading to a bona fide reentry center where they spend up to 4 years with programming that I've already talked about, and that's important. In addition to our probation and parole division, where we're funding day reporting centers in all of our district offices where people that are struggling on probation and parole have an opportunity at a day reporting center to get their business straight and do what they need to do in order to get jobs, to deal with substance abuse, maybe even a little GED education, whatever they might need that they didn't get while they were with us. And then, of course, we've had to pull out of our technical college system that we're funding our jobs, our trade jobs with the vocational training. And we have replaced that with justice reinvestment funding in DOC. And lastly, in the investment side is the community incentive grants, $6 million. This is going out to the United Ways, the Goodwills, Project 72, a lot of different nonprofit organizations out there that were working with us and had been in this environment, but not very organized. And very simply, we are better organized with that now. That is providing wraparound services for people that are coming out, in addition to in-reach programs where they can come in. COVID has kind of got us on hold with that, but they can come in, meet with those individuals in our reentry centers and in our state prisons prior to release to know what they're to expect when they come out and what are their issues, what do they need to deal with when they do get out. And we, where we focus right now in our prison housing, obviously we are emergency and transitional housing that didn't exist now exists, where we are providing short-term housing, which could be up to 2 weeks if people that are subject to homeless, or up to 6 months, depending on the situation. That has helped us a lot to get people on their feet when they leave us. And currently we have 21 approved providers in 9 parishes that are participating in that. Transportation, we all know that, and our employers should know that that's a struggle. Our probation and parole districts now have bus passes available to them, that they can do that in the areas where we have bus transportation. Our community incentive grants provides funding now in our local communities to provide some sort of transportation if they don't have bus transportation, especially in our rural areas. Might even be a bicycle, believe it or not. I mean, those are things that, I come to work every day and I hit the River Road here in the Baton Rouge area where we have one of our casinos. And every day I see 3 people on bicycles going to work at that casino. So I know it's working. And those are the kind of things, those little things like that make a big difference. And we are planning to focus our next round of our community incentive grant funds on transportation, really focusing in on knowing how important that is and creating van pool services, contracting with vendors, doing whatever we have to do in order to make transportation a little easier to deal with, to get to a job, to get to their treatment programs, to get where they need to go. That part kind of got left out in the early goings, but we up there and we have that on priority. And then of course, access to health care. That's always an issue. We are trying to get everybody a Medicaid card when they leave us. That opens the door for them to be able to get whatever treatment they might need, from substance abuse, medical, mental health. If they need that, they have access to that. And that's important. And lastly, and most importantly, and I think the reason we talking today, that is a key in anything that we do. If we can't get them out there, get them employed, then we're not going to be successful. And some of our grant recipients are offering job placement support. Our day reporting centers, we have 10 of them now in probation and parole, work with individuals to build resumes and connect to opportunities. CEO Works, a Center for Employment Opportunity in New Orleans, is something that we've partnered with. We've invested $200,000. Again, excuse me, a nonprofit that helps with employment. Ascension Staffing, I have to mention that. It's something that came to mind for me. What are the challenges out there? And what better way to learn what the challenges are with our employers than let's get together with a staffing firm that's out there in the private sector and help them understand what our challenges are and vice versa. You know, learn from them and what the employers' challenges are and what do we need to do to better prepare people to go into employment. And unfortunately, that got hit pretty hard with COVID. We were right in the middle of implementing that contract, and COVID has kind of put us on hold there a little bit. But I assure you that that's going to be something that's going to educate us all on better ways to do things. And you mentioned ATLO. I think, you know, we talked about that before the program started. That's something that's going to be talked about. It's going to help our employers, and I think Red and those will be coming on to talk about that in the next panel. But that's basically where somebody can apply for a job before they get out, very simply. And again, that'll be talked about in the next panel. An opportunity now with LRS, that's something that we've invested in, use JRI funds with the expansion of regional reentry operations in those areas where we have them. And we have 10 of those too in 10 different areas. Transitional work programs is another area that we have currently. We have 1,500 people. It was 2,700, but COVID has got us slowed down, that are working in the private sector before they get out. That's a supply line that I think we miss sometimes. They're already out there working. They have that experience being successful. Some retain the job. Some move back to where they live if they're not in the area where they live. And that's where sometimes we lose them. And we're doing better at connecting them to similar type jobs that they're in transitional work programs. We have 27 programs right now throughout the state. And the employers, probably in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 employers that are involved in that and hiring people. Specialty courts, I need to mention that. I think it's important for us to understand how successful that is with us right now. And I mention that because most of that is being done in Angola. There was legislation passed this past session to open it up statewide. There are some resource logistical issues with that, but we know it's successful. What happens is, very simply, if you have 10 years or less, nonviolent, you can get sent to Angola and spend maybe 2 years preparing yourself to go back to be put on probation. And the part of that that's so critical, which involves what we're talking about today, is you have to have a job. It is mandatory to have a job before you can go back. Our recidivism rate right now in that program is less than 10%. Is less than 10% compared to what we are right now at 41. So that's another indicator on how successful we can be if we do these things the right way. We have the basics, as I mentioned. We have literacy, basic education, high set. We do all that. We have a good foundation for that. It's working. We have real life work experience in our prisons. We couldn't do what we do in operating our prisons without our inmate population helping us do that. Maintenance services, major repairs, construction, roofs, all the things that we do here is done with our inmates with supervision. So we have a supply line of those people that are coming out of our system that have good work experience. We have 1,400 trade job and skilled workers in our system, 1,000 in food service. We have 2 food service workers in our department right now that are classified as food service. The rest of that is done with our inmates and learning how to cook, doing the things that they need to do in the food service area. Health and hygiene. We have hospitals. We have infirmaries. They're working in there. They're doing the things in there, helping our medical staff do the things that they need to do. And of course, housekeeping and horticulture is a big part of what we do too. So that's another supply line that we have a tendency to forget about. Vocational education, industry-based certification. We have 8 automotive technical AS&E collision repair operations, 7 welding in NCCER certified welding operations, 4 carpentry operations, heavy equipment. We've bought simulators for heavy equipment and truck driving to train. We had those programs established. Heating and air, HVAC, we have 4 of those programs, 4 small engine repair, 5 OSHA programs. concrete finishing, ServSafe. We have a multitude of programs that are going on in our system. And you know, we could spend all day talking about that, but we're doing a lot of things in our prison system to help people prepare. And as we've already talked about, the soft skills is so important in what we do. That is a critical part of any of our training. Soft skill is on that agenda for training. So what can our employers do? What can we do? You know, I think the first thing I would say is work with us on employment barriers. What are the issues? We have statutes, we have hiring practices, we have minimum work. We have all those things that we have to deal with. We need to open up that conversation, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's important, is just to develop that conversation. Visit our website. Honestly and very candidly, as I was preparing for this panel, one of the things in visiting our website that we don't do a very good job of is part of our website, and we're now going to have, we're developing an employers section of our website. What does an employer need to do in order to contact us if they're interested in at least having a discussion? Right now, I had something put on our website actually last night, and it's on our website today, of who they can contact and how they can contact us if they're interested in talking to us. So that's important. We want employers to know the advantages of hiring formerly incarcerated, help them understand those that have come out and how much they appreciate, how loyal they are, how much they appreciate having a job, all the things that go along with being employed and given that second chance. That's so important to know. We're piloting a web portal for employers incarcerated. That again is the ATLO thing that we talked about earlier. And I'm excited about that. I think that's going to have a major transformation for us if we can get that up and running, which I know we will. ATLO is a great company, have been with us in a lot of different areas and have been real successful in enabling us to do things online that we've never been able to do before. So, give us an opportunity. We provide any number of training skills, all the things that we do. We can do this all day long. We can make doctors coming out of it. But if we don't have employers out there that are willing to work with us, willing to give people a second chance and at least have a discussion about it, we're not going to make it. We do job fairs, just in kind of closing. I know I don't take too much time. Job fairs, I mentioned our website. Red Covington, who we're going to hear from at the next panel hearing, is our Assistant Secretary for Reentry. We didn't even have an Office of Reentry when I started this. I mean, the people weren't even thinking about that. Red has done a great job in assembling a great group of people working around him that are doing a wonderful job out there on promoting the things that we're trying to do. We do have an employer advisory committee. Actually meets tomorrow, and that group was formed around our reentry court initiative. And I'm hoping we can expand that. It's basically around the Angola and what we're doing up there with trade skills. They actually meet tomorrow here virtually, not here, virtually. And I'm part of that and be on the agenda. People like Eric Lane, and if you're not from Baton Rouge, Eric Lane and the Lane dealerships, a big automobile dealership that have been involved in hiring people, that are coming out of the system. Of course, Eric works with us on our radio and the things that we do there. And just finally, I didn't mention a lot about COVID, but COVID has obviously had a major impact on our department, as it has, I'm sure, on most of the correctional departments when you're dealing with this type of virus, a lot of the uncertainty and all. But we're really seeing a light at the end of the tunnel today. Where we are beginning to open up programs and do the things that we need to do. It's been 6 months. 6 months of no visiting, 6 months of very little, if any, programming. All that plays a role in managing a prison population. So with that, Scott, thanks again. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts on this. There's a lot more to this than what I talked about, but I think Louisiana is a good example of we're making progress. I've been in this business, as you've already said, over 40 years, and never have I been so excited about where we are as a department, where our state is. Our governor is so supportive of what we're doing and the things that he believes in. The justice reform effort, which I had the opportunity to chair, was a great opportunity. Heard all the sides and 10 pieces of legislation that were historic. And here we are. We haven't been at our prison population since the early 1990s that we're at today. And I hadn't mentioned Probation Pro. Our Probation Pro population has gone from 73,000 to 53,000. We're down 20,000 that are not on probation and pro, allowing opportunity to spend time with the people we need to be spending time with. So I'll shut up.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I hate to cut you off, but we're gonna move along. And you brought up a great point about culture. I left probation and pro 2 years ago this week, and I have seen a change in the culture over those past 2 years with positions like the regional reentry manager that coordinates private sector, gets all these resources together, and allows probation and parole officers an additional resource and promotes collaboration with the private sector. And I think that's a good segue here to Josh. Josh, we appreciate you joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, Josh is a Right on Crime signatory who has signed on to Right on Crime Statement of Principles, which you can find in our chat bar. Just over a decade and a half, Josh Smith built a small service company into a $30 million enterprise with more than 180 employees. But for a 5-year period before that, he was incarcerated in a federal prison camp in Kentucky for his involvement in marijuana and cocaine trafficking. Smith was convicted of 7 felonies by the time he was 16 years old. He entered prison at the age of 21 as an 11th grade dropout with no plans to exit any differently than how he entered. Instead, he found redemption through God and was guided by several highly educated white-collar criminals who he was able to learn from. Since exiting prison, Josh has spent over the past 15 years actively involved in criminal justice reform in Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, and in countries like Central America. He has supported programs that provide hope, training, and reentry support for prisoners and their families who earnestly want a new life. Josh, thank you for joining us today. Secretary LeBlanc has provided some great information about what's happening here pre and post-release in Louisiana and in the Department of Corrections. Your personal story is an amazing one. Our Christian faith is rooted in hope and in redemption. So please share with us your journey and how you found Christ, hope, and redemption in the federal prison.
Sure. Thanks, Scott, and thanks to your organization, Right on Crime. You guys are really doing some great stuff, and what an honor to be with Secretary LeBlanc. You know, I have the pleasure of being in Tennessee and serving with Commissioner Tony Parker, another leader in the criminal justice system, and it's been amazing to me. And you mentioned governor. We have a governor, a great governor here, Governor Bill Lee, who has been involved in actual prison ministry for years before becoming governor, in helping assist people. And I do have to say how encouraging it is to see these leaders in these fields, not just, as Secretary said, just managing people as it was maybe when he got in and what has been the kind of the status quo for years, but leaning forward and saying, all right, how do we work ourselves out of a job here? How do we take and make this population less? How do we equip them better? And you can see the results beginning. As Secretary said, it's a long process. It's not something that gets fixed overnight, but for me personally, it's very exciting to be able to see this trend happening, and so many other leaders throughout the country leading other states into this. Excuse me, forgive my cough. I'm coming through COVID over the last month, and you'll hear me hack a little bit on this presentation. So for me, as you said, 11th grade dropout. My father was out of the picture very early on too in my life. My mother worked very hard to just provide. She said she could afford good housing or good child care. She chose good child care. So we grew up in a poorer area for a few years, and then on and on. We're gonna have to change that. I'd looked up the felony convictions that I had when I was 16. There were 10 of them: burglary and theft, and then out of school right after the 10th grade, and was just out hustling the streets. It's all I had seen. I hadn't seen anything other than that type of environment. I mean, a very hardworking single mother who did everything to provide for us, and but without a father figure, without other examples around. Ended up in prison at 21 for a drug charge, and it was there. I will say that for where I was at, it wasn't the prison programs that were helpful. We didn't have very many, and the ones that we did have weren't very quality. But what we did have is we had a prison population that had a lot of white collar criminals. And these were, this is the first time I'd been around educated bankers, stockbrokers, real estate professionals, things like that. And so I began to spend time talking to them. And, somebody asked me not too long ago, they said, well, you obviously showed, dedication and commitment to this, and you did it, and most other people don't. Well, I would disagree with that. I think there's some that wouldn't, but when presented the opportunity to someone who had never been experienced to that, it's kind of exciting. And what I told someone is what the biggest motivation for me was, I'm sitting in here talking to these people that are mega millionaires. I mean, had tremendous amounts of success, lots of education. And I would talk with them and I would think, well, wait a minute. There's no difference between myself and them. I mean, some of them I would even argue weren't that smart at all. Yet, here it is. They had different family structure. They had a different education structure. They had a different opportunity. And from there, it just challenged me to want to learn more. So I began to, anytime they would lock somebody else new up, I would go. They locked a stockbroker up, a big hedge fund guy. Well, next thing you know, I began to start reading about the stock market. There was a banker out of Nashville that they locked up. This guy was phenomenal. I mean, he was tremendously helpful for me when I got out. That plan is what really helped make the difference for me. There was a real estate person, people that owned a lot of real estate. So I studied a whole lot about real estate. And so I did all that. And there were many times that many of the other fellow inmates would just laugh. They knew that my wife now, my wife and two children were living in government housing. I wasn't out there to be able to support. So now they're being provided for. Food stamps, welfare system, struggling just to get along. And they knew that, they would going to make any difference. And I would have to fight that mental battle. But I'm looking at these people going, man, I'm reading these books and I'm thinking I can do this. And so when I got out, my wife drove me around for 3 days and I had to beg for a $6 an hour job. It was, I mean, you had no choice to be able to get out of the halfway house to do that. That's what you had to do. And so I found myself literally as a grown man, begging for a job and just saying, give me a chance. And so I got a $6 an hour job and I worked it like I was making, $100,000 a year. I busted my butt and I went to this one place 4 times to get this job. And I told him, I said, listen, I've been in prison and all that. There's not a job here that you can ask me to do that I'm not going to do. You want a toilet cleaned? I've got great experience. You want a floor clean? You want a shelf clean? I'm going to do it. Maybe somebody else would argue about it. I'm not going to. I'm going to do it. And finally, he hired me. And from there, I had this banking plan. And so even at $6 an hour, I saved as much as I could. Got a banking account, started building some credit, started following the things that I had been learning over that time. And so things just started, coming together. Next thing you know, about a year and a half in, I was able to buy my first piece of real estate. It was a struggle I can't even explain to you. And so now fast forward, each year just progressively got better. And I still didn't have much money. I was still reinvesting the things that I did, but I had a plan and I continued to read. I continued to grow my mind and started a little business. And next thing, my business had 1 employee and 2 employees, 3 employees. I continued to build my credit. Next thing you know, I bought another piece of real estate. And today I own, I don't, millions of dollars worth of real estate, a whole lot. And you know, have built a large company, have several other companies and investments, and now have the fortunate ability to be able to give back. I sold my company last year. Our governor asked me to serve on a task force, a criminal justice task force that he put together. And I had a large offer for the company that I owned. I never planned on selling it, but it allowed me to be able to focus more on what I wanted to focus on, being criminal justice and really prison reform, changing the way we look at these things. And so we started a foundation called Fourth Purpose. You know, they say there's 4 purposes of incarceration. The fourth one being rehabilitation. And when you look at our website or you ever hear me talk, what I say is the challenge isn't rehabilitation. You know, to rehabilitate something, that means it was once right, then it was broken, and you want to make it back right again. Well, I didn't start out right. So I didn't need to be rehabilitated. What I really needed to be is transformed. And so now, you know, my wife and I put over $10 million into this foundation, and it's about making a prison a place of transformation. How do we take and give the same opportunities that I was afforded, the same lessons, the same teachings, the same inspirations, and help others be able to be in a similar position that I'm in? I've had the pleasure of mentoring a lot of men coming out of prison. I've mentored a lot of them in prison. And I've watched what these investments do. I mean, I just talked with a guy last week who celebrated his 3rd piece of real estate that he's bought. I've started working with him several years ago, really intentionally about 2 years ago, his credit and all those things. And this guy did 12 years in prison, okay? He wasn't educated. He wasn't anything, but now he has learned these processes and principles. There's a guy, the company that I sold, I hired this gentleman, his name's Josh also. I hired him 12 years ago, and he at $6 an hour. He busted his butt. He went and learned at every department. If I needed him in something, he went and did it. And because of that, it gave him experience as he went. When I sold the company, he's now the general manager of this company. I had hired him after he was doing 8 years in prison. And he now operates that $30 million company. And so, you know, I have found, you know, when you're talking about to employers, I don't tell people to hire people because they're felons. Sometimes I'm asked to speak at conferences because they just assume that I'm going to say hire everybody as a felon. I'm not going to do that. I interview people. I interview people with felonies just like as I do others. What I say is don't not hire them because they're a felon. Don't not hire them because you see it on a piece of paper that they committed this and committed that. And in fact, I'll tell you, I built a big company and made millions of dollars. And I owe a lot of that success to several people like that. Frankly, I say, you give me somebody that's been in prison 4 or 5 years, I'm going to hire that person probably over somebody that hasn't even been in prison. And I say that because they want a second chance generally. They want to work hard. They want to prove themselves. And I can't find a more dedicated and committed person, employee than that person. Now, what's unfortunately in the past in prison systems, what it's been is they're not working to prepare. They're just housing. And so people come out very ill-equipped for positions. And I think that employers have seen that for a lot of years. But I will say to employers, there's a big change. Here in Tennessee, we're working on a lot of things. Commissioner Tony Parker is. I know that he brags on you, Secretary LeBlanc, on you guys and your leadership and that. So it is changing. These people are coming out better prepared, and I think employers would be wise to give them that chance. But you know, for me, I'm committed to helping, you know, just be that example and find those areas that can help people really truly have a chance to transform while they're in prison. I'd love to see more public-private partnerships. I'd love to see. I believe that really the link to businesses with these prisons and some mentorship things. So my company, we would go in and do mock job fairs. And many times this was when some of my top employees would learn my history. I don't just, you know, hey, welcome to our company. I was in prison. They learned that through other people and through other things. So we started doing mock job fairs at a federal prison. And we would go, and before they weren't very good, just frankly. There's a lot of good people trying to do it, but it's generally ended up being government people or different organizations, and they're really nice, but they don't hire a lot of people. And so we said, how about we do one just for you? I'll bring in HR people, I'll bring in our staff, our attorney, everybody. And so we went in and we did it. And can I tell you, I had a lot of nervous employees. I mean, they were scared. I mean, we're pulling up. It was an interesting conversation going up, And can I tell you that we've done many of them since, and I've got employees mad at me if they don't get invited. And these aren't formerly incarcerated people, that work for me. There's several educated and all that. This is their first experience ever seen a prison, and it's the most sought after trip once we do it. So I believe it's good for companies, team building. I mean, when you're doing something that makes a difference, when you go in and you see these faces and you see and you have conversations with these individuals in prison, it's inspiring. And so I think there needs to be more of that, more of these, conversations happening where companies can be able to help mentor, give real mentorship to people and things like that, and help bridge that transition. But anyways, I'll end there. I'm excited to hear things like you guys in Louisiana and you guys putting these panels together, Scott, to be able to have these conversations. So I appreciate you allowing me to be a part of it.
Thank you, Josh. And I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to the whole focus of our employer forums is one, to expose employers to what's going on inside our prisons, what's going on outside of the prisons, where we have people like Goodwill, we have United Way in New Orleans, but not to we don't want them to just hire people with a background, but as you said, we don't want them to exclude them solely because of that background, and getting to know the person and getting to understand, as you said, most people coming out realize that this is a second chance, and more than likely may not get another chance, and conditions of probation and parole require that a person have a job to get started. So it was great to see how you went through those struggles, starting out at $6 an hour and moving up. And as you said, your story may not be typical, but what we don't want to have happen is when someone reaches out for that opportunity to get assistance, that they're shut down, because it's too easy to get back and get involved in the cycle of recidivism and go back to the old ways. When I looked through your website, there were several things that caught my attention, but I like where you pointed out that you're looking for authentic and lasting transformation from inside the prisons all the way to outside, and that's what it is. It's that authentic transformation that's going to be long lasting, because that's our problem. Secretary LeBlanc mentioned we had a 43% recidivism rate, and it has dropped to 41%. It may not seem like a lot, but that's 300 to 600 lives that have been changed, that are not back in the system. As the motto of our forums have been, from tax burdens to taxpayers, that's several hundred more Louisiana citizens that are either working or have been successful. And we'll take those small steps. It takes a while to get things in place and get things moving. I'll open up to a few questions. This one's probably for you, Secretary LeBlanc. Is there a list which lists all of the employers who have agreed to be amenable to hiring formerly incarcerated for the purpose of directing our clients to these companies to seek employment?
Well, the straight answer to that is no, there's no formal list, but we do have a list of employers that are currently hiring in the TWPs. But that's a good question. It's an excellent question. And if there is a list, I'm not aware of it. But that's certainly a good point. And our Probation Pro Division may be accumulating that list as they get people hired or as we hire people. But I'm not sure that exists, but it needs to. That's a good question. Helps me.
I know as a former probation officer, people would ask us all the time, who's hiring? And I'm sure there's a few companies in Opelousas, Louisiana that probably don't like to hear my name, because, when there's 3 or 4 companies hiring, that's who you sent everyone to. And we develop relationships, and I think that's what is going on with the regional reentry managers, is to develop that relationship between probation and parole and the businesses in the community, to let them know what's going on. Employers can actually use probation and parole as an additional HR, an extension of HR department. There'll be drug screens. There's accountability. They can help them with soft skills. They can walk them through a lot of things. So it's very important to develop that relationship. And
it is, Scott. One thing to mention in your comments too is that we've quit the issue of checking on them on the job. That was just bad. We don't do that anymore. Obviously employers don't appreciate people having to come in and check. So that's stopped. That's even on our TWPs now. We are very conscious of that kind of stuff with our employers, and making sure they understand that we don't check on them. But we do. I mean, they do drug tests, and they are well supervised.
The next question, I think it's for you as well, Secretary LeBlanc. Says, in this new day in Louisiana corrections, there are job preparation done in state prisons, but so many people are in local jails. And you touched on this a little bit. What's being done in those jails to help prepare inmates for future employment, which is about half of the people that are currently in DOC custody are in the state.
Yeah, even worse than that, 80% of discharges were out of these parish jails. And what we've done is the reentry centers, but we also have vocational and education programs through Title I funding now that we've opened up in parish jails. There's a list of that. I don't have that in front of me, but we probably have 27, I believe, or 28 jails that currently have programs now that didn't have them before. But our reentry centers are the focus of that. Our reentry centers are where, just right now in Plaquemines Parish, for example, that was a brand new facility. I call it brand new, built out to Katrina, that was built at the local level that wasn't being utilized. So now anybody going back to Orleans and Jefferson goes into that facility for up to 4 years. We try to focus on 2, but it can be up to 4 depending on what the needs are. And they get the type of services they should get before they transition. And we're doing that in East Baton Rouge. We haven't started it yet, but COVID kind of put us on hold there. We're doing it in St. Tammany, and we're doing it in Caddo. And then we have, I think it's 5 more reentry centers that have opened on a small scale. But we're investing the funding in those so they can get programming before they return, and they go back to their area. In other words, if I'm from Orleans and I'm doing time above I-20, then I go into Plaquemines Parish where family can visit, they can do the things they need to do. InReach comes in, they spend time with them, and they're getting access to programming before they're released. Whereas before, they were cold turkey right out of jail, right onto the corner. That's what was happening to us. And we, with our reentry centers, and of course, and you mentioned that our probation and parole program coordinators are catching them. When they do get out, if they haven't had that opportunity, we have a kind of a net to catch them when they get to probation and parole now, what they didn't have before. I think I think that's a result of our prison population going down, that we're catching these people before they hit the streets and making sure they get what they need.
I definitely agree. Josh, I have a question for you. In some of the visitation series and on your website, you talked about holding on to hope, holding on to faith. What recommendations would you have for Secretary LeBlanc or anyone that's running a Department of Corrections, how they can influence or how they can help people that are inside the prison walls, which is a difficult place, to hold on to hope and to hold on to faith? What can they do to encourage those two very abstract? It's really hard to quantify. But what do you recommend, or what do you see that's being done that they should continue to keep those values going?
Well, I would say 2 things. One, unfortunately, and I know this is not the case in Louisiana because I've got someone that formerly worked in Louisiana. Unfortunately, what happens in many prison systems is they don't allow the real access for volunteers. You've got a lot of volunteers that want to come in and they're just met with several different hurdles, and sometimes it's low down on the pole, but it's almost like it's a burden, and then they come in as volunteers and they're treated that way, and there's a lot of hoops for them to have to jump through. And so, you take, prisons like Angola, who are just leading the way of making sure volunteers have access and putting it in there. And and I think you can see the results. You see these recidivism rates going down. That's one of the big things I would say. I would say secondly, actually I'll add one. I would say family connection. But the better that you can keep a family connection, the better someone has a chance to be able to succeed. And so many times that's tough. They're far from their family. There's all kinds of situations. So, as much as you can do to create the visitation process, allowing time for children to interact, all those things are really, really important. And then I think, the other thing is getting good examples in. For years, they wouldn't allow people formerly incarcerated to come back in. And I remember there's a warden in a federal prison. I was told I'd never be able to go back into a federal prison due to my charges and doing time in federal prison. And a warden heard me speak, and he said, he waited for me, and he found me. He said, I'm signing a memo to get you in. Now, he took a great risk to do that. It was several years ago. And since I was the first badge volunteer, as I understand, back into a federal prison. The more you can get these formerly incarcerated back to where others can see, wow, they made it. There is something that can be done. There is some level of success that can happen. Prison is a hopeless place. And a lot of people in there like to keep creating it that way. Sometimes you have staff that tell you, you can't do this. You're never going to be able to be this. I was told I'll see you when you come back. That was my parting words from guards, right? You have fellow inmates now. So it is just a very tough, hopeless place in many instances. And so the more positive examples you can get in, real life, real world examples that you can get in front of them, whether it be business people, they don't have to have been formerly incarcerated. It's great when you can find some of those success stories, but there's few of those. But finding other people that can encourage and give hope like that, it's essential. And when I go in and speak, it's generally, once they know who I am, it's standing room only. They're dying for just some hope. And what I try to do is just say, you can make it as well. And it's up to you. You decide. You want to waste your time? You want to use your time? Do you want to use this time to read books and grow, or do you want to sit over here and shoot dice the whole time or play dominoes? So, but positive messages, just allowing them to be able to find hope.
If I could comment on that real quick, Scott. One thing, and this is right in front of me right now, it's called Information Handbook for Caregivers of Children of the Incarcerated Parents. And that's in my in basket that I'm to proofread. But my point is, it makes a great point. Family unification is so important here. We have now the Families of the Incarcerated group that I meet with on a quarterly basis, get input for them. They're broken up into subcommittees make recommendations to us as how we can improve that. I can't overemphasize the importance of family unification, and our system is not built around that. So we having to try to improve that and making sure that if they want to stay in contact both ways, that we can make that happen. I think that's a great point. And certainly volunteers is a key component. We use guys that have gotten out to come and speak and are successful and be able to share their experiences with them. So that's important.
You guys do that well. And I'll tell you, I have to ask myself many times, what would my life look like if my wife and I didn't remain together? And I can tell you, it doesn't look like it does today. Even with the preparation of the teaching and the books and all those things, it would be totally different if I wouldn't have kept that family unit and been one of the few fortunate ones to be able to do that with my wife and two children. It gave an inspiration level that I wouldn't have had being apart from them.
I can imagine.
I totally agree. As a probation officer, and Secretary LeBlanc will second this, due to some staff shortage at some of the prisons, probation and parole officers went in and started working visitation to allow the guards to work other areas and let probation and parole officers facilitate so that visitation could happen. And that was one of my first experiences inside the prison. And I can tell you it was a moving time. I sat there and watched as people arrived. I watched the inmates as they were nervous, as they were getting, smelling fried food at 9:30 in the morning from the Houdat Cafe. And I watched with great joy when some of these hardened guys, big smile on their face, they're bringing that plate of food to what looked like grandma and children, and they just stood there and they smiled. And then, the worst part was when you made that call and saying, 10 more minutes or 15 more minutes, and you see that, they look and watch them leave. And it's just, you do see the hope that it brings, and the happiness, the joy for that hour, 2 hours, however long the visit was. And, it was really great to be a part to see that. It also opened my eyes as well to, as a probation officer, where was I sending someone when I did a revocation? And I think that's an important part. It definitely shaped the way I thought about going into a revocation, the way I thought about handling violations. It's like, do I really did what this person did deserve or rise to the level that they should go here for, whether it's 6 months or the rest of their term? It really makes you think, and I saw the role that family plays. And this ties in great with, we're running out of time here, but Josh, you started Visitation 2.0. We have the links in the comments, which is accomplishing that because of COVID. The prisons have had to close down visitation. But what you're doing is allowing what we're doing here, a video into the prisons. If you haven't, you need to take a look at the series. You will cry one moment, you will smile with joy at the next moment. So many people trying to inspire that hope and give people the courage they need to make that transformation. And this leads into our next forum, which is going to be with Assistant Secretary Rex Covington with DOC, Clay Mixon with ATLO, and we're going to talk about the role that technology plays. We see where it can play in helping out in visitation because of COVID, but we're going to see how technology is going to help people that are pre-release connect with employers, and post-release coordinate with probation and parole to make sure these connections stay and these connections last. Secretary LeBlanc, we greatly appreciate your time. I know you have a tough job. I don't know if 2020 can throw anything additional. I know you've been evacuating people with all the different storms. You've been dealing with COVID, not to mention everything else that goes on in the day-to-day operations of running that great of a facility. Josh, I appreciate your time too. We appreciate your support here at Right on Crime as a signatory, and definitely I was inspired by watching Visitation 2.0, and I've only gotten into the first segment of it. Very moving, very great series, and definitely appreciate the hard work you're doing to help with transformation. Thank you both, and appreciate everyone for attending. And this will be recorded, and we'll send out a link in a couple of days to where you can view it if you want to watch and hear us all over again. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all, Scott.
Yep, thank you.